This is full-blown crisis mode for United Airlines, and the question is, how does it ultimately, with the public, dig itself out of this mess? The crisis communications expert Karen Leland on United's next move. Karen, I was shocked with the initial reaction from the company, which actually called this passenger disruptive and belligerent. That certainly seems like a mistake.
I think it was completely a mistake. I mean, they handled this badly both in the pre-part, the incident, and then post. And the CEO of United coming out and saying we were re-accommodating passengers and also saying what he said about the passenger was difficult. You know, those are all ways that add salt to the wounds. And I think United is operating already at a low level of goodwill with their passengers because they often come in, quite frankly, in some of the lowest rated spots for customer service. So they didn't have all that much goodwill to begin with, and this isn't helping it any. Yeah,
to your point, this unleashed a social media avalanche, not just because of the response to this, but everyone else started to share their horror stories dealing with this airline over the years. Is it because they only have 3 real competitors, 4 major airlines have sliced up this country, that they're tone deaf, or is this a trend that we're starting to see overall in corporate America?
I think this is a factor with United. I think they're both true. I think there's a factor where you've only got 3 or 4 major competitors. However, I will say, and by the way, I'm a million-mile flyer on United, so I've encountered lots of problems with them over the years as a customer myself. I think what you have in United is a corporate culture that's very focused on operations. So they're focused on doing things as efficiently as possible and as cheaply as possible. And while that's admirable to some degree, what's getting left out of that is the customer service. And so the change of the culture is what really needs to happen. However, to your point, I also think that I've noticed a definite downward trend as a branding expert in service overall across the board in many industries. You know, we all thought technology was going to make things easier, better, smoother, but in some ways it's dehumanized a lot of these experiences. And things like flying are essentially an emotional experience. And so the quality of service has a big impact, and you are seeing a downward trend in that, unfortunately, with some airlines. You also have other airlines such as Virgin America and Singapore Airlines, where they've still made that emotional experience of flying a very high customer service experience.
Right. And it was such a thrill years ago to go flying. And in fact, people got dressed up, but the crew was also dressed up, and they gave you all the goodies. When I was a kid, I got the playing cards, the pen, the cologne, the postcard, all of that stuff. And I know it's all about dollars and cents, but it also feels like there's a disingenuous aspect to the airline industry with getting out of the gate. So they herd you in, they get out, they pull out the gate, and they check that box, and then you sit on the tarmac for 4 hours.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that what's starting to happen on airlines a lot is, you were joking about getting the playing cards, whatever. Today, if you have to beg them for a bag of peanuts and a pillow, even in business class. So, I mean, I just think the overall lowering of the standard is a problem. And the issue that United's going to have, quite frankly, because they didn't have a lot of goodwill to start with, is United's going to have an issue where they're not going to be able to solve this in the typical way with just like a policy change and a personnel change. They're not going to be able to use a slogan to get out of this.
Right.
They're going to have to take a really deep look at the culture of their company. You know, the CEO of United said today, this isn't who we are. Well, I think it is who they are. I think culturally it is who they are, and that's what they're going to need to change.
Karen, they won't have a slogan change, but they did change their song from Rhapsody in Blue to Rhapsody in Black and Blue. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Talk to you again soon.
My pleasure.